Hi everybody. We're just about to be demuted. I think you can hear me. I'm trying to get it. There we go. There. Sorry I have a bit of a cold, so if you can actually hear me in two voices, that's because it's very mystical. Mystical cold. Okay. I hope everybody's doing well and moving along in their own journey. And Jennifer and Mary Forrester, Jennifer Butler and Mary Forrester gave us a couple of questions for tonight. And it looks like, let me see if I can, hello? Goodbye. I'm sorry, I thought it was maybe Lee. I thought you were calling to tell us that you couldn't hear us or something. Anyway, but you weren't, so. Jennifer asked, can you talk more about how to get to the point where you want to help? And she's talking about teaching here. And she has what most people would have in relationship to trying to help somebody. A little bit, she's a bit anxious about getting in front of a group of people and trying to be of help. When, you know, is there ever a point when you should decide that it's best not to teach you about? There's the anxiety part. And this is natural and normal. There are thousands of people out there attempting to help to the best of their ability. And they're doing the very best they can and using, let's say, information that is being gleaned from other people who have been involved with spiritual development over the years, and attempt the best they can to give hints about aspects of their journey that would be extremely helpful to others. And they're doing their level best to attempt to do this. And they do this with so much sincerity and so much respect for everybody that would be out there who would be interested in learning and growing. As a teacher, the issue is not about becoming extra special in the eyes of other people. And at the same time, you attempt to do the very best you can with the materials that you glean from other people. There is a deep level step that is taken by teachers eventually. And that is, they become engaged with what you might call the soul, or levels of linking up to higher planes that allow you to be able to express to others that which maybe has not been expressed by others, and sometimes expressed in different words, in different ways. And this level of engagement is not common. However, in many teachers, it seems there's a hope that it would be more common. In the meantime, learning is a very important key. All the information that others have experienced and had perhaps written about or just talked about, because this was primarily an oral subject. It was never written. The writing came along after, let's say, I'm trying to think of the right words, after a bit, when individuals who were real teachers would only pick up one or two or maybe three or four people initially and begin to teach them from a higher state, helping them to become more and more able to be a functional person, a functional being, a being moving towards being linked up with another state. And this was fraught with all kinds of personality difficulties. The difficulties primarily that people have around personality orientations is that they want to be valued, they want to be important, they want to be considered spiritual. And that was why some of these very ancient teachers did not teach in the normal spheres of everyday life. And they didn't do this because in the normal sphere of everyday life, people use their egos and that ego, from my perspective, is not negative. It is, they use their personality, I'll change the word, primarily to engage with others and move through the natural, normal rubric of who's more important than the other person, because of the dear levels of insecurity that occur all over the planet, including in North America as well as Europe, as well as everywhere. It just doesn't matter where it is. It's always there. Some of the other ancient traditions would take a person in and put them through horrendous difficulties, normally focused on getting the personality to be less focused on how valuable they were personally, and getting them more focused on higher states. And that was initially then considered to be the only way to do any work as a teacher. And those higher states were linked up in the internal levels of mind or emotion, emotional mind, or right into the physical body. And I know some people don't agree with that, but the physical body is as spiritual as the emotions are, as the mind can be, or the intellect can be. And then following that, a higher level of mind, higher level of emotional expression, and a higher level of physical engagement with very high planes. You see, all of these three levels are engaged directly with those high planes right from the beginning. There's no separation, but when we come into these physical forms, we're automatically involved with the separation because we're engaged primarily with the focal point directly related to and engaged with everybody else in the same boat, with survival here on these planes, these physical, emotional, and mental planes. So initially, everything was directed towards being really able here on these planes. So shamans would focus on how many antelope and how far they were away, and they would head off, trusting this shaman and his visions or her visions, and find antelope so many 50 miles away or wherever it may be, 100 kilometers, whatever it may be, and they would shoot them, bring them home, and the tribe would survive. Well, this changes in our world. Now it's, you get out there and you have a whole bunch of people, and invariably the question always is, how many people come to your classes? And therefore, how many antelope are there in your class? 10. Whoa. Well, I know somebody who gets 10,000. Wow, that's tremendous. I wouldn't want to be that helper, that teacher. But the need is so great with those 10,000. And that teacher is trying to help them to learn how to live their life better, so that they could go on and begin to move into a state that goes with this life and beyond this life, the two of them attached to each other, very closely together, and then begin to understand a different level of engagement, that where the individual suddenly begins to notice with the form or the personality, one could say, using it like a tool to perceive these levels with, as opposed to a tool that proves that they are really important. The first part is a true teacher. They are attempting to use that form, the personality, to perceive and learn how that flow, universal, comes in to us, expresses itself outwardly in the form of a personality. Get that one. So it's not negative. It's a form of a personality. And eventually, after the survival modalities are complete or reasonably handled by the individual, slowly move into a state where the personality can perceive others, perceive themselves, engage with others, engage with themselves, and no judgment moves to enter into a form, the personality in question. No judgment occurs, and it just notices and tries to help. Well, good luck with that one. But that is the nature of a structure that is being constructed as an individual begins to look at and work with their own internal dialogues, external expressions, and you begin to have greater respect for slowing it down, for learning about yourself, for being able to handle more intensity than you normally would have, or normally had previous to a movement towards gaining access to more energy, spiritual energy, if you want to call it that. Through, of course, in the old traditions, initiations, and new traditions, initiations. Meaning, more energy can operate through you than it could operate before, and you're learning how not to use your personality as a lever so that you can be recognized as a very wonderful, wonderful spiritual person. At that particular point, your personality is being used still to count the antelope out in the forest 100 kilometers away. This is not a negative thing, but just a phase of engagement with growth. And there's a whole series of things that everybody goes through as a teacher. Jennifer bringing up one very serious one. As more energy comes in, usually it comes into a system where it's being currently used, which is traditionally makes perfect sense. If you have centers that are open in the old traditional modality, you might call it, the chakras, Zephyroth, whatever you want to call them, centers, and more energy starts pouring through. Now, one of the first, second, and third engagements with more energy is to want to run from helping anybody. First of all, you go through all kinds of devaluations that occur inside the individual. And one of them always is, well, I'm not worthy of being able to help anybody. I'm still growing myself. You see, that's the point. You are growing, and you help where you are growing. And you really become an expert on you. But you don't think of it that way. You begin to look at and notice that everybody else is doing the same thing. They're not able to understand how they are growing. So everybody's kind of in the same boat, but they can't see very much. The issue with this thing is it's a very important issue. As you begin to grow internally yourself, you actually are helping other people, truly. If you have a few people around you that you're trying to be helpful to, because your perception is getting a little stronger, it's really helpful because energy is coming through you, and it moves through you in places where you've been able to help yourself, and it tries to help others in the same places, even though they're not exactly the same. They're the same in relationship to the chakras or the centers. Energy moves through them to create a personality in all the levels of consciousness, not only in the ones that are considered spiritual. It's a very big difficulty in our world. We understand only that the upper centers are the spiritual ones and the lower ones are not. This is not valid. It is a lie. And it's perpetrated for the purpose of, let's say, stopping a person from being highly deluded. Yep, it's a strange way to put it. All of the centers are spiritual centers. There isn't one that isn't. This is really disturbing, for many believe a totally different kind of a way. But they have many levels, not only one level. This is what some people believe, they only have one level. It is not real. These forms must come together ultimately to create a larger form that really doesn't have a lot of interest in the self being highly touted or lowly touted, either one, because you can be definitely focused on being poor in capacity, depending on your upbringing. And this happens many times to many people over the whole of the planet. It's a dilemma. What do you do with all this? The question is, when do you know when you want to help? The dilemma is that you push past the idea of running away from helping. Help where you can. And try to stop the idea of competing with everybody else about how important you are if you are teaching. Believe you me, after teaching for a very short period of time, that you find out that it is not something that has a lot of glory in it. The wondrous thing about teaching is that when you can watch people growing, and you know that that energy comes in and it hasn't got anything to do with you personally, everything to do with you as just a being of consciousness through which, rather a tool, through which that flow operates. And it can engage with you mentally, emotionally, and physically. This is very disturbing to people because there's no real trophy. The trophy is an engagement with a higher level of consciousness. And learning about you sometimes it feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it's not that uncomfortable. And sometimes it's you're filled with kind of a, ooh, that was really wonderful, you know. But then you have to calm all that down and say, well, okay, wonderful, but if it is going to be useful, it's going to be a balance somehow in you so that you can actually be helpful to others, and having them become as able as you or more. It's easy for them to think they're more able than you. This is the personality tool that gets carried away within itself because it is vulnerable to this kind of carry away. It does not realize or understand that there is a tremendous universal flow that lies within, let's say, another dimension or another plane of reference that has clearly an ability to engage with these frames of reference, physical, emotional, mental, and personality orientations, which that is the personality. The coming together, the co-opting or the engaging with all these levels in an individual, and they express themselves through these levels, and we call them names. Ron, Jack, George, Jean, Jane, well, I don't care what it is, doesn't matter. I read something recently, Jennifer says, describe the body as having paths for incoming and outgoing energy. For example, the left hand receives new and right hand releases old. In your experience, does this make sense? It's a complicated question. In the old mystical system, they used to use left hand bringing energy in, right hand sending energy out. It's being manipulated by very creative minds. And it's an interesting creation because whenever we're stuck, we come up with something. It can be used for almost anything. If you were slightly clairvoyant, you would notice that most often the left-hand side of the body and the right-hand side of the body often have two different frequencies, and you would notice them and perceive them. The dilemma with being clairvoyant is that you would also grab onto somebody's view of what those frequencies or colors meant, and you would say that person's like this or this person's like that. The dilemma with that is it doesn't work that way. In some old traditional mystical systems, there was the ARE group, for example, really interesting, many interesting clairvoyants there. Met some of them myself, but they do their clairvoyance assessment based on emotional dispositional structure, which Casey did quite often. And you should read some of his books; are quite interesting and very informative. But don't throw your brain away. So, emotion can be at one level, mind can be at another, physical orientations can be at another. Old traditional Buddhist orientation using red and yellow quite frequently, and yellow and orange and red. These colors were stabilization structures. They were, in theory, real colors, which meant that they would engage in the science of the universe with a will that related to the highest of levels. And that would mean red and orange would be dominant, really so that they could go beyond the normal view of personality and what a personality does or doesn't do. I mean, that's a theory. The gold or yellowish orientation was there because at one level that gold orientation was, if you take a look at gold, there's a slight tinge of green in gold. It's quite interesting. And that you can move into the highest levels and have energies moving through you that aren't only affiliated with orange, red, yellow, violet, green, blue. Whatever level of color would be needed could operate through you. It's a very interesting thing. However, some of this is not talked about, and some of this is not even known by many people. It just doesn't matter if it's known or not. It's just out there, and that was part of the old system. And this was some of the knowledge that was not expressed primarily, but there was some of that in theosophy, for example, or other forms of theosophical orientations through Hinduism and Buddhism. What I would look at that, just generously say, energy can operate through both hands, outward. Energy can come in through both sides of the body, through both hands. They come in through chakras that can operate outward and inward. In the old traditions, they called it the east side and the west side, So God would enter through the east. so in the north and the south. These are traditional things that had been kicking around for a long period of time. There's nothing wrong with it. It's normal to have a different frequency on one side of the body than the other. Because she goes on, and I have often felt a difference from one side of the body versus the other. And notice that my hands often do not mirror each other. This would be normal. They don't have to mirror each other. Both sides of the body don't have to be the same frequency. It's just they don't have to be. In most cases, they're not. However, we don't have enough true clairvoyance. Usually we have clairvoyants who focus on the clairvoyance that they have based on a belief, based on a theory. And that is not negativity, it's creativity. And it is a part of the early phase of clairvoyance, and it can be tremendously profound. It can be almost, so succinct, but it will read the emotional disposition or the personality in frequency. But the individual will read that frequency based on their belief and based on their personality's orientation towards life and other people and how they see them. And this is a very big dilemma. And we are young in it, and you'll even find sometime under those kinds of circumstances, if you happen to be a teacher, for example, where others will read your frequency, not knowing anything other than an emotional orientation. And if, for example, you had a very strong will, that would show up as reddish. If you had a very brilliant mind, it might show up as orangish or green. Sometimes it could show up as purple, violet, but usually often mixed with a different frequency, especially green under those circumstances. It could be orange, but it's rare. On our planet, a lot of yellow. Wow, tremendous. But usually focused in relationship to the root and gonad center and sometimes solar plexus. But at the higher levels of that particular frequency, remember, tremendous levels of energy can pour through and will shift and change. In other words, a violet can flow through a yellow. A red can flow through this kind of goldish yellow. Orange can flow through it. Yellow can flow through it. White can flow through it. Blues can flow through it. It's because the individual can handle that kind of flow at this level for the benefit of another who needs a certain frequency. This means in the East Column, in some of the old traditional systems, they call that person very masterful in relationship to their capacity to handle flow. Okay, trying to make sense of the first two questions in terms of teaching. In Jennifer's case, I like that she asks a lot of questions. Anyone who asks questions, and she doesn't have an axe to grind with the questions. That means she's asking questions within herself. There are so many questions to ask. So few ask questions. Usually they relate to giving statements about what they believe. This is not a question. Not negative either. It's because of the insecurity that lies inside all of ourselves. No one wants to be seen as a person who doesn't know something. It happens. There are questions out there that no one has the answers for. That doesn't mean you can't be a teacher. A teacher asks a lot of questions, primarily of themselves, and primarily of spiritual engagement. What does this mean? Why is it like this? Should it not be some other way? Who said something about that? Oh, I can't relate to that. Let me try and relate to something else. Does anybody else say anything about that? Okay, these are internal personality questions. And there is a tremendous mix relating to those questions. But there's no edge on the question. They're real questions. The sincerity link is so profoundly important. Any answer that is received can be considered by the questioner then. If there is that other level of engagement around the individual validity of a personality based on the questions and the answers received, there is no questioning of the individual's tool. The personality is a tool. It's a wonderful, wonderful, precious thing. It should be negated by no one, but seen as young in most of us, because we are young. We haven't learned to open up yet enough to be quiet about what you know or think you don't know. Internal questionings individually has to go along with being quiet about how wrong you are and how right you are. It opens the mind, opens the emotion to a receipt of a subtlety that lies within, linked to something beyond. If you run out of your most important answers, you begin to be a teacher. The moment is striking and nervous. Wow. Every teacher has reached this point who is a teacher. But in a moment, you may notice a subtlety that is different than being right versus wrong, or wrong versus right. None of us get it perfect, but it is there, and it moves through many phases of engagement and quietens down that mental facility that needs to protect the individual at a level of dust that means that they are superior to others versus just being able to go beyond where they were before. It's a very valuable thing as a teacher. And what does help is teaching, doing your best. And that means prepare a little. And put down 4 or 5 things, and I say this all the time, on a board someplace that you want to talk about. And look at them. Go reading. You'll find you even don't agree with some of the stuff you read. That's allowed. And hopefully you don't agree with some of the stuff you say. That's also allowed. That makes your journey go deeper. It doesn't mean you're going to get it right, but it does mean you're going deeper. And reserve the right to change your mind at any given moment. You all have that right, and it is a very precious right. It allows you to go beyond some of the things that are out there that are supposed to be true. But at the same time, you don't need to go out there beating up on other systems just because you think you're right. you will change your mind. You have that right. Teaching is not easy, but it is so valuable. And tell your students you have the right to change your mind, and then tell them when you do. It's allowed. Then that gives them the right to change their mind about what they think. And my God, that is so hard to do. But that's called growth. The other one is the cell memory in the body inform the higher mental and spiritual bodies. In fact, I kind of covered that. Physical, emotional, and mental systems are already engaged with the higher levels. They just spread out and engage with the levels that they can handle based on how they've been trained and how they are continually willing to allow themselves to be trained. You know, it's very subtle. Most people are not willing to go beyond themselves. If they were, everybody would be enlightened. They're automatically more right than somebody else. Now, if you had the automatic reversal of that and say, well, today I think this is the way it is, tomorrow I'm not sure. And then tomorrow say, you know what, I think I was right. But you know, with a codicil, just a couple of changes, here and here, I think it's more like this. That would be helpful to you, and it might be helpful to others. Thinking is rare. Reacting is normal. So when you're reacting, it's normal. Not protective. There's no sacred cows in real growth. I wish you well with that one. There was another one, Mary Forcer. She asked, what is an empath, and are we all empaths? And I'm just going to play a little bit with that. Well, remember, this is my view, right? So you think about this and see if it makes any sense to you. We're all empathic. Most of us have grown out of it, so to speak. This great grown out of everything. I used to be this way, but I've grown out of it. I used to be that way, but I've grown out of it. Well, you haven't grown out of it. You're just more sophisticated at whatever you did. But anyway, let's not go there. You were in your mother's womb, unless some of you were developed as an egg. A bigger one, of course, with a little bit of shells. As an empath in your mother's womb, you learned to decipher tunes or tones relating to the world around you. You sensed your relationship with what was comfortable and what was uncomfortable. You didn't quite have the ability to make sense of it. So instead of making sense of it, you have a memory about when those tones are used, that must mean that this is good. Remember, you were in embryonic, is it embryonic fluid? Coaching. And here you are swinging on a kind of a wonderful swing until the intensity gets strong, and then you intensify. You're learning what feels good and right, and the best way to be in your life is like. Now ask the question, what's an empath? You are empathically learning now from everybody. But already, all those years behind, you have constructed ideas around those feelings that lie within you in this huge emotional brain of yours. And you've decided, which includes the head, by the way, because you have a nervous system, right? And all of those nerves run down your spine into every area, including your waistline, the reproductive area, the feet, the legs, the back, the face, everything. And here you are, empathically looking for clues. You look at people's faces all the time. They don't know what they're doing, but you know what they're doing. You assess what the face does based on the empathic moves that you had a long time ago. And immediately you come up with a reflexive answer to what that must mean. If you hear tones like, and you have two people engaging, and one's telling the other what to do, which one do you want to really be like? The one that's really firm, or the one that's seemingly submissive? Well, sorry, you get both. How you use them, that's another story. You would use them both for your own benefit. When it behooves you to be submissive, you will be. When it doesn't, you won't be. Now, I just took two paradoxical responses, because often we mess around with the paradoxes and we try, matter of fact, we don't think of going into the levels of in the middle. If you're in the middle of there watching, you have your first clue as to one level of spiritual growth. So here you are in the room. I'm going to change this for you. And there's a whole big intensity going on. And you hear the big, God knows what they're talking about. You don't know either. You don't speak English or French or German, whatever. But you attach tonal reference. Then you hear the other one. And that was my version of whatever that might be, but anyway, it might be something else. Or it might be quiet. No reference point, hardly, but you're looking at the quiet. So in the middle, which is rare, you're saying, what are these tones all about? Now, you're in the mood, right? I haven't got a clue what this is. What am I doing in this womb anyway? God, I got to learn a new language. Geez, I already knew one before. It could have been Greek. It could be anything. Now I got to learn another one. Gee. Well, it's okay. Odds are in your favor. You're going to learn this fairly easily because you're going to hear the dialogues like blah, 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 blah. That's how you'll hear it. And then eventually you'll hear things coming together, and you'll watch people doing things. You get it all together. You'll figure out, oh, that's give me, oh, that's push away, or that's throw the food on the floor. Look at all the little guys run to pick it up for me. You'll learn everything. It's wonderful. Ooh, precious. But if you learn how to look and watch, maybe you'll remember someplace along the line, 20, 30, 40 years hence, that if you are watching you engaging with life, similar to in the womb, you will notice that you do certain things primarily to get your way. And if you have a head and a mind within that brain, at least a link, you might question why you're doing that when it's not as necessary as you think reflexively it should be. In that particular moment, a link-up with a higher level of perception, sometimes called empathic, may become stronger than what you think. It will stimulate the brain, which stimulates the mind, gives it a reference point through which to enter an idea that is separate from or different from the already constructed personality reflexive responses that are there and pretty dear to you in terms of being valued as more important than your brother or sister, your friends, and anybody else for that matter. And this fills a great void, because you will never be better than anybody else. You are still you, and they are them, and you are both worthy. The deepest level of empathic perception relates to a moment of silence through which higher mind can operate, and often does, and truly will, even on the emotional levels. And it will be quite physically engaging, because the physical body can link up with a higher level. The emotional dispositional structure can link up with a higher level. The mind, through the brain, can link up with levels that are different than what are usually commonly used for self-protection and personal internal protection as well, or development. This is often called the ego construction, because that is all it is. It's a form that is constructed for the purpose of survival. It is not a negative thing. Even if you don't like the other person's way of engaging as a personality, it does not mean that that's negative. It means that your view, your ego's view, doesn't like their ego's expression. And that often happens, as may happen even now when you're watching this. So this kind of level of deeper engagement promotes a quietness within the mind, within the emotion, and within the form, so that you can actually notice where the intensity is operating and move to soften it down just a little bit, and then move to wonder what you are actually perceiving. Consider what is actually going on, and recognizing the relationship that you have as a kind of observer of that which is you, as well as others. And that becomes very refreshing, in that you're not judging in this, you're learning with this kind of observation. And you will see yourself doing similar things. And when you do, you have a right to slow it down, knowing full well you will feel very vulnerable in doing so. Nonetheless, preparing yourself for the expression of more mind, more broadening to enter in, because you have stimulated a quiet within. To some degree, not perfect, but a tremendous beginning. Thus, life is precious, because you are watching deeper than you could ever watch before, and engage with great respect with others who are growing. And because they are growing, they will also begin eventually to know that quiet and realize with deeper understanding that that perception is not there to augment the personality, but to engage with higher levels and know what's there in the nature of you, as opposed to the importance of you. I hope this was interesting enough to pay attention, or at least listen to. I wish everybody well. Have a good evening, and talk to you later.